Welcome to the Musar HaTorah podcast for Parshas Reeh. Join us as we explore the weekly Parsha, uncovering valuable insights and striving to become the best versions of ourselves through Musar teachings. This week's Parsha opens with Moshe's powerful declaration, Re'eh anochi nosein lifnechem hayom bracha uklala. See, I have placed before you today a blessing and a curse. The Torah then elaborates on the brachos that will come if we follow Hashem's mitzvos, and the curses that will result if we don't. At first glance, this seems straightforward. The Torah gives us laws to follow and then provides motivation through rewards and punishments. However, there is a fascinating medrash in Devarim Rabbah, which suggests something much deeper is happening here. The Medrash tells us that the brachos and klalos promised to Bnei Yisrael weren't merely motivational tools. They were actually meant to show us what is right and what is wrong. In other words, these consequences themselves serve as a moral compass, helping us distinguish between proper and improper behavior. This raises a profound question. We might have thought all the mitzvos in the Torah were meant to teach us what to do and what not to do, while the brachos and the klalos were simply there to motivate us to keep those laws. How is it that these blessings and curses on Har Gerizim actually show us the proper path to take? Rav Henoch Liebowitz provides a brilliant answer that reveals something fundamental about human nature and our relationship with Torah. He explains that if it were not for the extra motivation given on Har Gerizim, we would not be able to properly define our obligations to Hashem. Why is that? The answer is because we would rationalize ways to free ourselves from the yoke of mitzvos. Even clear-cut halacha can easily be swept away by our Yetzer Hara if we don't remember that there is a terrible punishment for neglecting the mitzvos and a sublime reward for fulfilling them. This insight is profound because it reveals that the problem isn't with our understanding of what's right and wrong. Deep in our souls, we all want to keep the mitzvos. The challenge is that our Yetzer Hara can take us off course if we don't keep in mind that our actions will lead to an either punishment or reward. Think about this for a moment. How often have you found yourself rationalizing behavior that you knew deep down wasn't quite right? Maybe you told yourself that this particular situation was different, that the usual rules didn't apply, that you had special circumstances that justified bending the guidelines. This is exactly what Rav Henoch is describing. The Yetzer Hara doesn't usually try to convince us that wrong is right. Instead, it specializes in creating sophisticated justifications for why the rules don't apply to us in this particular case. Everyone else does it. It's such a small thing. I'll make up for it later. The situation is complicated. I don't have a choice. These rationalizations can be so convincing that they cloud our judgment about even the most basic obligation. Without the stark reminders of consequences, both positive and negative, we would lose our way. Rav Henoch uses a beautiful metaphor to illustrate this concept. He says that the seas of life are stormy and confusing, and it's easy to lose sight of the right path to take. At these points in life, we need to look inward at the compass of our neshama. When we do that, we can see the right direction to travel. Here's the crucial part. The Yetzer Hara is crafty and tricky and will exert itself heroically to confuse us about the right path to take. However, if we remind ourselves of the infinite reward and agonizing punishment that we bring upon ourselves with our deeds and thoughts, we will cut through the fog and confusion of the Yetzer Hara's rationalizations and see the truth with unerring clarity. How can we practically apply this profound insight? There's one simple but transformative practice we can adopt: the practice of the pause. The next time you find yourself about to do something or avoid doing something, and you hear that little voice in your head starting to explain why it's okay, why this situation is different, why the normal rules don't apply, pause. In that moment of pause, ask yourself one honest question. Am I being truthful with myself right now, or am I trying to justify something I know isn't right? This isn't about becoming paralyzed by self-doubt or second-guessing every decision. It's about developing the ability to recognize when our Yetzer Hara is working overtime to confuse us. Most of the time, when we pause and ask this question honestly, we know the answer immediately. Sometimes the answer will be, actually, I really am being honest. This genuinely is a complex situation that requires nuanced thinking, and that's fine. Proceed thoughtfully. Often, the answer will be a recognition. You know what? I'm making excuses. I know what I should do here, and I'm trying to talk myself out of it. That moment of recognition is incredibly powerful. It's like suddenly seeing clearly through the fog. When we acknowledge that we are rationalizing, the rationalization loses much of its power over us. The beauty of this practice is that it doesn't require years of training or complex spiritual techniques. It just requires honesty and a willingness to pause for a few seconds before acting. But those few seconds can completely change the trajectory of our decisions and, over time, our character. What makes this teaching so powerful is that it reveals something beautiful about human nature. We are not fundamentally flawed beings who need to be forced into goodness. Rather, we are souls that naturally want to do what's right. However, we need help cutting through the confusion and rationalization that can cloud our judgment. The blessings and curses of Parshas Reeh aren't threats or bribes. They're clarifying lights that help us see through the fog. They remind us that our choices have real consequences, that every decision shapes not just our external circumstances, but our internal reality as well. As we read Parshas Reeh this week, let's remember that seeing isn't just about intellectual understanding. It's about maintaining the clarity of vision that allows us to recognize truth even when it's inconvenient, even when the Yetzer Hara is working overtime to confuse us. This week, let's commit to practicing the pause. When we hear ourselves beginning to rationalize, let's stop and ask that simple question. Am I being honest with myself right now? That moment of clarity can cut through all the fog and help us choose the path that leads to true bracha. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Musar Torah podcast. Until next time, may we all merit to see clearly and choose wisely. Have a good Shabbos.